find it. But to yourself, you're in last place every day. You can't quit your heart, don't back up, don't back out. Every night I wish for it in my soul. Tell me if you know how to follow. Your dreams, baby. Oh, oh, yeah. Tell me if you
There it is. There's that button. Hey, everybody. How's it going today? So today is October 6th. Is it Wednesday, right? No, Tuesday. October 6th. And man, there's a lot going on. And I've been trying to, I don't know about you, but I'm trying to stay a little bit away from politics lately. It's been real rough. Especially with the whole, Trump getting COVID and getting over it, and then he takes off his masks. Nobody around him, but took off his mask. Oh, how dare he take off his mask with no one around him? How dare he? I don't know. Anyway, so today's stream, I thought I would talk about some more Agile stuff. You guys don't maybe know this, but I've been really, really deep into the Agile stuff more and more lately. One of our clients is very much on trying to kind of expand their Agile in what they're doing in their environment. And so it's really kind of led me on this more stringent path of exploring more things and in terms of Agile and Scrum and Safe and extreme programming and lean manufacturing and stuff like that. So Kanban boards, well, not just boards, but Kanban is actually it. We're very familiar typically with Kanban boards, but not everybody is familiar with the Kanban in terms of the methodology or process. But it is actually uniquely separate from like Scrum or extreme programming. It is kind of its own special process, if you will, of how to do things. And I like to, so there's something that was laid out by Kent Beck, that was, and I'm just going to kind of lay out some general things here just so that you understand maybe some of the context by which I say a lot of the things that I do. But I think Kent Beck really helps to kind of categorize the way that we do work, or how we think about things, how we think about concepts around the development environment. And we have these things called values, which are like these overall overarching sets of things that we value, things that we want to, I wouldn't say necessarily accomplish, but just things that we try to hold ourselves accountable for, right? And then we have principles, and those two terms are typically interchangeable, values and principles, but what he does is he says principles are more of a domain-centric concept, right? So very specific things, like if you are, when it comes to, when it comes to trying to deal with like people and communication, perhaps, that's a very specific domain that is related to some values, but it's much more explicit about working with others versus maybe working with customers, right? So there's kind of some different domains there, and so you have principles around those different domains. So that's kind of the difference there between values and principles. Is values is kind of like this overarching set of things that we hold ourselves accountable for, and then principles are basically values, but they're more scoped in on something. And then there's these things called practices. And practices, I think, are where most of us actually associate Agile and things that we do. So when I say things like test-driven development or iterations, or in terms of sprints, or a Kanban board itself is actually a practice. Things that we do, the actual concrete things that we do to adhere to the values and the principles that we ascribe to. So that's kind of the thing. And right now I'm kind of working on something about trying to expand that upwards too, because typically Agile is about just the team focus, about, once you are a team, this is how you operate. But I'm trying to work out how to expand that out to the company wide, and I've been working with some people. I'll move this down a little bit. I've been working with some people to try to maybe get something a little bit more concrete together in terms of kind of a company-wide plan, a company-wide implementation of Agile. So it's not just focused on teams, but it's what we call scaled Agile, and I'm not really directly borrowing this term from SAFe, because that's what SAFe actually stands for, Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprise. I've worked in one of the clients that we have is actually a SAFe environment, and so I'm not really trying. I just want to make sure it's clear. I am not really necessarily pulling this idea of scaled Agile from that framework from SAFe. I'm using it as the actual term, like how do you take Agile and scale it? Okay, so how are you going to scale Agile? How are you going to bring it out to the enterprise across the entire company? And or more or less just more of the development process. You can actually, it's funny because I work with people across a variety of different domains that have nothing to do with development. And the concepts that are in Agile still directly apply. I mean, the practices that we try to ascribe to can be applied in so many different scenarios. It's crazy. In fact, as a curriculum author and instructor, I also have my own set of Agile processes that I stick to, and a lot of those things have nothing to do with development, right? It's writing curriculum and delivering, content. That's a very different thing. It's very similar in a lot of respects, but it's not the same thing as software development. And so you can take this kind of framework and map it over to whatever the task is that you have at hand, and you'd be amazed at how many similarities there are between the work that you're trying to do and what software development has. Anyway, so underneath all of that context, understanding values, principles, and practices, that's typically where I kind of start to dig into some of these questions that I see that get posted up on Reddit. So I thought I would take some time to pull up just a few of the questions that I see on Reddit and just kind of answer them here in this video and see if you guys enjoy this. So let me switch on over. And I still haven't figured out this transition thing. It's very abrupt. It's just like that. And I like those smoother transitions. I got to find the way to edit those on Streamlabs. I still haven't had a chance to really dig into that. But I kind of want to look at some of these things. So the first one here is delivery manager role, a thing. What is their role? So this one comes from Vince Lee 888. 4 hours ago, says, not sure if this is selection bias, but I've noticed the delivery manager role being more popular nowadays. Is this a relatively new role? What are the responsibilities? From what I have observed at my current workplace, it's the same as Scrum Master. So, all right, there's, I kind of want to bring over this article because I was kind of confused about this too. I'd heard the term a few times, and I was like, that's a weird thing in Agile, delivery manager. I've never really heard that term before until recently. But this guy, so I'm going to bring up his article. This is written by somebody named Stephen Thomas, and this was posted back in 2015, but it is something that I think is a really good explanation here. And the short of it, I'm just going to kind of do a too long didn't read kind of thing. But the short of it is they're essentially a product owner that's been rebranded, and also includes a few of the Scrum Mastery type of things. It's like, assume you don't have a Scrum Master, and you want somebody to still kind of be in charge of making sure everybody adheres to Agile and Scrum. Like that's basically what it is. So why have a role called delivery manager? The product management brand is so damaged that rebranding may be in order. So, and I think that's probably very true. Rebranding is something that can be very helpful and it can be very hurtful. If you have developed a lot of good karma, I'm going to borrow Reddit's term karma. If you've developed a lot of good karma around a particular branding, a particular name of something, then you don't want to change it. Like it becomes a holy land. It becomes a third rail. You do not touch it. You don't want to change it because it's what people get to know you by. It becomes, the branding, the names are intrinsic in the company, right? And how people associate your company. That's the whole thing about branding and marketing, is being able to take something iconic and make it iconic, right? Take something that should be the iconic thing, the branding that you want around your company, and making it an icon of pop culture or whatever the culture is that you're working with. So when we're saying rebranding, if you feel like you need to rebrand, that typically means that your original brand has been compromised. Right. And I think that that's probably an accurate description of what project management is. And in fact, product manager, product owner, product manager, product owner. In SAFe, these are two separate roles. Product manager is somebody that's a little bit higher up and kind of manages the overall application, whereas a product owner is kind of a bit more domain specific and really acts as a proxy between the team and the product manager. So just so that you know that there's a little difference there. Project managers are typically people who are trying to determine deliveries and resources to, delivery timelines and resources that need to be acquired, and ensuring that deadlines are met by the individual people or groups. That's essentially what project management is. And there's kind of a distinction, at least that I make, and I think a lot of people in the community make, between a project manager and a product owner. And that's kind of something that Scrum was trying to get at, is product owners are basically acting as negotiation between the team and the customer, whereas project management is really that resource intensive, deadlines, adherence, that type of stuff, which is so, project management, I think, is an artifact of waterfall, right? That whole philosophy that we can kind of parse out exactly the steps that are going to be taken, and we know what the deadlines are and the handoffs are going to be, and they facilitate those handoffs, right? Or if they determine what the timelines are supposed to be, and they hold everybody accountable for that. And then they themselves are accountable for whether or not the projects get delivered on time. And all of this is just so bureaucratic that I think agile teams really buttress against this, especially because I think they're kind of antithetical ideas, right? You have one that says everything's going to be deadline based, and the other thing that says, look, we're just trying to deliver value. Screw your deadlines. Your deadlines are, we understand there are deadlines and we do need to observe them, but look, we've got to be realistic about our deliveries here. We can't just set an arbitrary deadline and say, yeah, we're going to meet it. We don't really know. That's kind of what Agile is pushing against, because, as I like to say, Agile is about growing software, right? Software grows. It isn't necessarily built. When we think of building, we typically think of more assembly line type of things, or building a house in phases. And that's not really quite accurate. In software, you're actually growing something. Something is, you're kind of adding more and more pieces to this puzzle. And it builds. Build is an accurate term in a certain way, but I think the connotation that most of people associate with the term of build is not necessarily accurate. Let me just make sure I'm live, because I noticed I don't have any viewers right now, which is kind of, usually I have at least one person watching. Am I? Yeah, I'm live right now. Okay, nobody's watching. Huh, go figure. So, I guess all you people that are going to watch this after it's been stored and you guys can watch it off the channel, that'll be great. So let's go back to this. So there's little question about the purpose, getting stuff delivered. The role is not about discovery, and it's not about coaching on process. It's about getting stuff published live. So this actually kind of brings me to something that Kent Beck has been talking about recently. He calls it the 3 E's. There's the explore, expand, and extract. And these are 3 different phases that development teams can go through based upon the product that they're working on. Because sometimes you don't even know what the product is. So when you're exploring is just spiking everything. And a spike, by the way, means is like a research and development kind of terminology. Like, we don't even know yet. We're trying to explore. We're trying to discover. We're trying to look and see, hey, if I build this thing, is this going to have any response? Okay, if I build that thing, how are people going to enjoy that? And you just kind of like toss out every idea you can possibly think of until one of them sticks. And like a quintessential thing that might be would be the like button on Facebook, right? Like, that was, somebody just had an idea. What if we add a like button to it, and stuck that up on the wall, built the code, dropped it out, and observed to see how much interaction that had. It took off, and therefore it's now a part of what we do, right? So there's the exploration part, and then there's the expansion part, which is where the teams are working ferociously just to keep up with the scaling. Like, okay, we found something that's really good. Now we need to make sure that our platform supports it, right? Or we all of the additional features around that one feature, all the different workflows around that one feature are fully explored, and we've basically sucked everything. Well, actually, that comes a little bit later. But we basically are we've got all these people that are now interacting with this like button that we now need to scale up our software. We need to find efficiency things. We've got, performance issues that we got to deal with. We need to figure out how we're going to deploy. So now all of a sudden we have to think about Docker deployments or Kubernetes or whatever it is. And how are we going to scale this thing? That's the expansion part. And then the extraction is that, okay, now that we've reached a certain level of stability with meeting all the demands that our clients have of this one feature, how do we then suck every dollar out of this, really? Like, how all the value that we can possibly pull out of this, let's do that. And so you kind of have these fringy workflow type of things that are tested and worked out to see if they work. And it's kind of a little bit similar in terms of spiking, but you actually already have something, a basic foundation, but now you're just trying to look for what are the different pieces of that thing that actually kind of help build it out even more. And this is just kind of like, you have this curve, you have this bottom part, and then you have this curve up, and then you have another plateau. So bringing us back to this thing, there's little question about the purpose, getting stuff delivered. The role is about discovery, not about coaching on process. It's about getting stuff published live. So that to me is more about the stable part at the top in terms of delivering features, right? That's the we've already got something built, and now we're just kind of trying to make sure it stays popular, right? It kind of we're milking every little thing that we can out of it, which means we have to stay lean in our processes, right? This is where we need to be constantly identifying those defects in our process, those constraints. They call it the theory of constraints. We need to find all of the little tiny pieces of the little pebbles along the way, the impediments, as people like to say, that are stopping the teams from doing the delivery process. So it's not necessarily about discovery or coaching on process. It's about the identification of what is slowing it down and then making sure that they're publishing, right? That every feature is getting published on time. So it's kind of going back to a little bit of that waterfall project management. So it's kind of weaving these ideas together. The delivery manager is also responsible for triaging runtime issues with the product, thus freeing up the product owner. Okay, so that's almost a QA thing. QA is typically in charge of triaging. Well, I shouldn't say typically. In a lot of businesses, QA is in charge of triage and determining, is this even a real thing? And then reproducing the error and detailing out what the problem actually is, and perhaps even exploring the solution so that when the development team gets a hold of it or the product owner, gets a hold of it, they can identify quickly about what the process is that needs to be done to fix it. So yeah, it needed rebranding, but it's also kind of like this culmination of other pieces being brought back together. So I think that's a pretty good example of it. Some of the answers they got. So I was hired as a coach, but have ended up as an agile delivery manager. I think the role probably came from the release train manager role, which release train manager role is a role within SAFe Agile. That's again a scaled agile framework for enterprise. But there could be other reasons for it too. By the way, if you're wondering, let's pull up SAFe. I've got it right here, scaledagileFramework.com. So if you want to know what SAFe is, if you haven't heard about this for lean enterprise, it's this big organizational chart. And so all of this is to essentially facilitate this little piece right here to there. That's the part where we work, right? So all of this has been added to just so that this team can do that. Okay, just so that you're aware, that's what SAFe is. And if you think that there are some problems with this, you're not alone. This is a little bit cumbersome, right? There's a little bit of red tape here, maybe. Maybe it says it's safe, but or maybe it says it's agile, but there's some things in here that feel a little command and control-ish. Yeah, you would be right. So, again, not to say that SAFe is the wrong process. It might very well be the right process for you. But for I think a lot of people that actually do SAFe, it's like, man, this doesn't feel agile. Anyway, okay, I'm going to move off of that. Let's go to the next question. What's your number one question about user story map? Oh, this is a good one. Hi all, I just started coaching product teams around user story mapping and I was curious about your number one question around user story mapping. What would you like to know, learn, or better understand? Looking forward to hearing your questions. So the first question is, our number one is, what is a well-formed user story for doing technical infrastructure work when there's no actual user? Ka-ching! That is the number one question I hear over and over and over and over and over again. And I actually answered this in this almost an identical question in another subreddit, and it got marked down, even though look, I get it. People don't like to hear this. But it just simply means there's kind of two things that this means. Number one, you are putting the cart before the horse. You're trying to determine a technical implementation before you actually have determined the user. So of course you're not going to be able to write a user story. You don't know who your user is. And the second thing is you haven't sat down to actually think about it all the way through. It's real easy. Look, I get it. I'm a software developer. I love technical specs. I love just tell me what it is you want done. I will go and I will implement it. It's that easy. In fact, I like TDD because it determines the spec first and then I do the implementation. So trust me when I tell you that I love specification as much as anybody else. I love having a technical spec in front of me to determine what it is that needs to be done. However, when you are doing this communication and verbalization of the work that the team is going to be doing, you have to take it very, very carefully and seriously. Okay, you cannot think of it from a technical perspective or a technical implementation, because the moment you do, you have lost the user. You have lost your business partner. You've lost the people that you were trying to communicate with because they don't know your job. They don't know. If I said I'm switching from SQL Server over to MongoDB, do you think that they have a clue what you mean? Of course not. So how are you going to write a user story if that's where your starting point is? We need to migrate our data over from, this SQL Server to a NoSQL Server. That's a huge undertaking. Like, that's going to require a ton of rewriting. Okay, great. What's the business value? What's the user value? I don't know. Right? That's the problem, is you're trying to, and this is where the conversation really starts to hit a roadblock, because there's a technical implementation that the team knows that they need to do. Like, I need to make this change. I need to make this technical shift. But then you try to inform the user about why that is important, and you can't articulate it because you didn't think about it from the user perspective to begin with. And really all we're talking about here is technical debt, right? This is a technical debt. The business has identified that this debt has accumulated so large that now a switch in technology is required. Otherwise, like, this is what we need. We need to pay our debt in this way. We need to, switch technologies, or we need to scrap this thing and restart over. Like, that's typically the one of two routes that's typically gone. So all that's happened here is there's been some sort of technical debt that has been switched over. And there's an example here that, let's see, there was an example given. Oh yeah, right there. The example, the work to be done is something like changes are required to the software that integrates X with Y because Y is moving to a different platform. So the number one thing that's going on here is, again, cart before the horse, technology before the user. And I understand this draw. It is how I think most software developers think about their work, is in terms of what the technical thing is that I need to do. But you have to shift your mentality over to what is the user. Now, once you have that mentality, when I say user, I don't necessarily mean an actual person. Well, I do mean typically an actual person, but I mean it doesn't mean a person that is outside the company, or it doesn't mean someone that is outside of your department. A user can be someone in your department, just not on your team. So you have to think about the application boundary. So what is it that your team works on, right? The application boundary. Here's the code that we manage, or the systems and services that we ourselves are directly responsible for. Anything outside of that, anybody who interacts with that boundary is then a user. And that could be a developer from another team. It can be a DBA. It can be a manager. It can be an actual customer. It's somebody, though. Because somebody is pressuring your team to make this switch. Somebody is telling your team to make this switch. Therefore, value has already been determined. Somebody has already figured this out, that this platform transition needs to occur. Okay, somebody has figured that out. And it could be, in this case, like what they're saying is, well, something so integrates with X with Y because Y is moving to a different platform. So Y is moving to a different platform. They're moving all together. Okay. So that means Y is moving. So Y is moving to a different platform. And therefore they are in some way, shape, or form either somebody. So they're typically, if that's somebody that you are consuming, I'm trying to get at this from two ways, because I don't know in this term whether or not Y is the client or you are Y. Like, is the person who's writing this team Y or is the person writing this team X? If you are team Y and you're moving to a different platform, then you need to be explaining to X why this transition is important. Okay, so you may have a technical reason for that. It could be speed and efficiency. It could be it could be the delayed responses that they're getting. It could be for scaling, to handle a larger workload. So whatever those reasons for switching over are, they should be based upon some sort of value being delivered to the user. In this case, X. Okay, so if we're Team Y and we're changing our platforms, there's a reason for that, and it needs to be based upon X. And this is where the question comes in. If you cannot articulate why changing platforms is good for X, then why are you doing it? What is the purpose of doing that? Now, the other reason why that might be, and just to get to this, there may be a business value that has nothing to do with the particular consumer, but maybe with the management saying, we have found a cheaper platform that we want to move this product over to. And so we want to cut costs in that way. So then how do you express that back to Team X, right? That, hey, internally, our business has decided that this needs to be better, or that we need to cut costs in this particular way. And you could handle it one of two ways. You could either say, well, we're cutting costs on our side so that we can provide more features for Team X, right? That's a simple way to kind of, it sounds maybe shoehornish, you're kind of shoehorning it in, but it's true. It's just determining it from a different perspective. What is the value that's being provided by X by us cutting costs? There is value there to Team X. If we are cutting costs, it means we're going to stick around a little bit longer. It means that maybe those funds can be redirected to other resources to provide support for Team X, right? There's value there to Team X in Team Y doing this platform change because there's been some sort of cost cutting that's been determined. Okay. Now, what if you're Team X? What if you are Team X and your supplier, Team Y, right? You're integrating with Team Y and they are changing platforms, and you have to do some sort of fixing on your side to reintegrate with Team Y. Okay? Well, to me, it seems pretty obvious that the value of why you do this for the user is so that services continue, right? That the service doesn't shut down on them. That's the reason why you do it. So X may have a consumer, a user, a business partner that is talking to their X platform, their X application. And the reason you need to make this conversion and change inside of the X project is because Y is changing their platform and maybe even changing their API and stuff. So how do you articulate back up to the customer of Team X why you need to adapt in Team X for the changes made to Team Y? Well, that's really simple. So services don't get shut down. Like, there's value in that, I would think, so that services can continue. Services will resume, whatever that is, right? We need to have this effort so that our service does not shut down for our customers. So all you have to really do, and this is the thing that's kind of frustrating and annoying at the same time. I admit it's a little bit annoying because I encounter these kind of questions all the time. This one especially is we have a technical spec, we have a technical thing that we know we need to implement, but we can't jam it into a user story. Look, you're not jamming anything into a user story. What you're doing is you're identifying who is going to be affected by this, And why should they care about it? Right? And if you can't tell that, if you don't know those things, then it's a reasonable question to ask, why are you doing it? If you don't know those things, why are you doing it? And if you can't identify it, then you need to sit down and say, well, maybe this doesn't make any sense for us to do. Chances are there is somebody, right? There's somebody that is being impacted by this. There's somebody who wants it for a reason. There's already been a reason stated. So there's a value inherent already in the work that needs to be done. It's just a matter of figuring, of saying, okay, this will impact that group of people or that person in particular. And so that's our user. That's our persona. That's who we're impacting. And they want this thing because of this. There just isn't enough analysis there, I think. Most people just, again, put the cart before the horse. They start thinking about we think about the technology implications first and foremost. And then we try to, and then we say, well, we can't do this. It's a technical thing. Now, one of the last things I want to mention about this is this doesn't mean that you, in your stories, in your story writing, you ignore the technical implementations. It doesn't mean you ignore the technology part of it or that you ignore stating it. You can add those things as very specific tasks that are attached to a story. Okay, so we want to avoid these type of tasks as much as possible, and they should be related to architectural type of questions like, hey, we've had an architect come in and say, this is the most efficient way for us to perform this thing, and so we're going to follow along with their guidelines. Okay, but the idea behind a user story and acceptance criteria is that it is communicating back to the business user, right? To whoever that user is, it's communicating who that person is, what the value is for that person in doing this particular piece of work. And then the why is up to the team, or I'm sorry, the how, excuse me. So the what and the why are in the user story, but the how is up to the development team. How that is supposed to occur is the development domain. It is not the user domain. How is not a user is not a user domain thing. Okay, it's not in their realm. They don't care what your database is. They don't care what platform they're using. Right? They don't care about any of that. The user does. All they care about is this thing. When I click on that, it does this thing. That's all that they care about. That's all they've ever cared about. So it's up to the developers to figure out how to do that implementation. Now, this is where it is in the developer's domain to figure out what is the best way to do it. And you may consult an architect who may have particular knowledge about the technology that's out there or the technology you're currently working with. You can ask them about how should we construct this thing, right? That's what you're doing with the architect role is you're asking them to provide some details, some specifics about, okay, what are the things that we need to do? And that may be where you come up with this. There's a new spec that's a new technical spec. The architect is identified about this thing. But really all they've done is they've identified technical debt, right? It's just discovered technical debt. So, or it's not really discovered. It's more, what's the word for it? It's organic, right? It's an organic technical debt that comes from the platforms that you're using. It just comes out of it. And, whenever you base your software off of some other piece of software or some other technology, if that other technology gets updated or changes in some way, you're going to have technical debt because now it's changed and you have not. And you need to kind of fill that gap somehow. So there's kind of this growth that other systems have that you need to then match up to. And that gap there is a piece of technical debt. So all that an architect has really done, if that's the case, if the architect says, hey, you know what, we're really behind on this technology like SQL, why are we still doing SQL 2012, or 2000 SQL Server 2003? Like, why are we still on that? We're clearly in some technical debt. We need to fix this ASAP. We gotta shift over and do 2019 or something. So you go and do that. That whole undertaking, though, feels like a technical spec. It doesn't feel like it in any way, shape, or form affects the user, except it does. And it's your job to figure out how that change is going to affect the user. Okay, what improvement does this actually provide them? Again, maybe it's 2003 is way past its end of life. The servers that we're currently running it on are so old and ancient, they're about to die. So in order for us to maintain our service, right, to our user, for our user, the benefit is we are still a company that exists. That's a benefit. I'm sorry, but that's a value. That you just have to identify the value. And that it may be that fundamental, that we still exist as a business. That's still a value, okay? So you have to really sit down and think about these things thoroughly. And if you don't go through that exercise, you are not going to be able to articulate to the user why you're doing the work, or to the business owner why you're doing the work. And then it becomes very difficult to explain why it's taking so long. I don't understand. Why is this transition taking so long? Well, you don't want that conversation. You want to try to avoid those discussions. You want to have more like, we're delivering on this. This is what you're going to be able to do. These are the things that are going to continue to be able to be done, right? That's the kind of discussion that you need to have with your users, not why are you doing this? The why should already be a part of the discussion. Like, it should be known why, because it's in the user story. So yeah, it's frustrating. You can tell I'm passionate about this because I get this question all the time, and even when I answer it, people are like, well, they don't even tell me why they don't like it. They just don't like it. And I think it's my best guess as to why people don't like it is because it feels, for some people, I think, a bit shoehorned. Like, oh, we know that this is technical, that we don't want to write a user story. This seems silly to write a user story for this. Like, we know as a team that this needs to be done. Who cares what the user impact is? We know that, like, we shouldn't have to articulate this to the user. Trust me, when I say that businesses that don't know what it is that you do, they care very deeply about the money that they're spending on you. And if you can't explain it, your job is in jeopardy. Or at least the trust that they have in you is in jeopardy. Okay, so this is a monumentally important thing in order to communicate the work that you are doing back to the business owners. If you are not actively pursuing this in trying to determine who the user is and who the value is, then you are putting your own job in jeopardy, or at least the trust that they have in you, you're putting that in jeopardy. Okay, so this is this is one of the most important things that you can do, is take the time to sit down and think this through. Who does this impact and why do they want it? That's what you got to do, is the who and the what, or the who and the why, right? The who and the why. That's what you want. Who, what, and why. Those are the three things that go into a user story. Is who is the persona? What is it that they want to be able to do? And why do they want to be able to do it? And you need to be able to articulate those things back to the user or to the business owner. Because if you can't, then there's going to be a solid question. Why are you doing it then? And it's not a question of, it's not even a question that you, like, we say, I say this kind of flippantly of why are you doing it? But that's legitimately the question that they are asking themselves in their heads. If they don't express it out loud to you, that is what they are thinking in their heads. If you tell somebody, we're moving again from SQL to MongoDB. We're going to switch our entire code base over to NoSQL. Okay, great. Why? Well, we had we got our classes that are great and everything, but our ORM is kind of slowing things down. And we're not really happy with the ORM. And rather than taking the effort to convert all of our ORM code into stored procedures and, and some SQL query calls and stuff like that, rather than do all of that work and redo all that, we figured, why don't we just switch over to a different platform that allows us some dynamic documents for certain things. We'll probably make the migration a little bit slow in order to kind of facilitate things. So we're not doing it all at once. We're just kind of new processes. We're going to switch over to MongoDB. But eventually, within about 6 months, we'd like to have everything converted over to MongoDB. Okay, but why? Like, the question is why? Well, it will improve... it'll improve our lives as developers. I mean, it'll help us out with our code. Okay, but why do I care? Why? How is this going to help the business? Well, I mean, you see how this conversation goes, right? You've probably had this conversation multiple times with business owners because you were thinking in terms of the technical things. You need to sit down and think about it from their perspective, from the user's perspective. What will this accomplish? Okay, if I said, okay, we need to switch over to MongoDB because some of our processes are really slowing down. So the user experience on these certain areas, these certain screens that they're pulling up, they're a little bit slow right now, and it's impacting our performance in terms of, you know, how quickly people are able to go through the site. And we're losing people, we're losing clicks, we're losing some of our clientele because of the speed in which our application responds. Okay, there's value there, right? We've identified the value, we've identified the user as somebody that clicks on this particular screen, and now we can express that to the business owner. We are impacting these people in this way, and this is why it needs to be fixed. That's all you have to do. But it's a process that I think developers inherently are not particularly fond of doing. They may not even really be all that good at it because it's something you have to kind of practice. You have to really think it through. You have to sit down and actually consider all of this stuff about who is interacting with your systems. And we as software developers, we typically don't really care, right? We care in a way, like we want to make sure our customers are happy, but you know, exactly how this little tiny thing impacts their experience, like, oh, come on. It's just going to improve it, okay? Just understand it's going to improve it. Just be good with that. That's what we want to tell them, right? That's what we want to say to our customers. It's just going to improve it. Just trust me, okay? I'm the expert here. Move this way a little bit. I'm the expert, so you just need to trust me that this little change that we're doing here is going to be helpful. Okay? That's not going to work. It only works for so long. Eventually, somebody's going to ask the question, why? Why does this need to be done? All right, let's see if I have any others here I want to answer. Planning meeting in Kanban. Oh, actually, this was the other one I wanted to read. Agile means no dates. I'm a director at a manufacturing company, and we've traditionally done waterfall. I have a new manager who has done Agile. With all the great things I hear about it, we decided to give it a try on a new project. Now here's the problem. Our go live has slipped a whole quarter, if not more, and he's telling me he can't deliver to dates because Agile dictates that you just keep adding to your backlog, and he'll tell me once it's complete. So brilliant, internet strangers, I need your help. What happens when your features in your own burn down chart extend past your go live? Do you move your go live or deliver what you have, given it's the highest value features in a workable product? Sorry if I don't have the right terminology. I'm still learning. All right, so this is a tough one because this is, again, intersects with project management, trying to have these hard and fast dates, and we as software developers, we're growing software. Like, how long does it take to grow a tree? How long does it take? Well, what kind of tree? How tall do you need it to be? We don't even know how fast the tree's going to grow. We might have several other trees that we can we've had some experience growing those trees, and sometimes they grow, but honestly, sometimes they don't even work at all. Sometimes, you put the acorn in the ground and it doesn't grow at all. Something happens, it's a rotten acorn, or the ground isn't fertile enough. Like, there's all sorts of the little tiny constraints and factors in here that we don't really have any way of knowing, but we can kind of think it's going to be somewhere between here and here. And what we can tell you is that within 2 weeks of us planting the acorn, if we don't see a sprout, then we know that it's a bad acorn and we need to drop another one and start over again. Like, that's what we can tell you. And that's why I think it's a much more apt analogy to talk about growing things, because that's exactly what's happening in your software. Is you can be 2 weeks into a project and realize, man, we're going the wrong direction. And if we continue down this path, all we're going to be doing is causing more problems. It's rotten to its core at the very beginning. We need to take the lessons that we've learned from this and do it again. So I need to drop that acorn in a different plot of the soil, right? That's what you've got to be able to do. You need that's being agile. That is agility. right? That's being able to say and make decisions based upon data and driving some of those decisions. But the process is growing. It is not a static, standard, gated system like you have in Waterfall. So now that doesn't mean you ignore dates. It just means if you have a deadline, you deliver all of the value you possibly can deliver up to that point, and that's pretty much it. Okay, like if you want to set a date, the only thing that you can actually know of that is going to be, so I like to commonly say the only thing that we truly know in terms of time is how long this iteration is. Like I don't even know what the next iteration might be changed. Maybe after this retro, we decide to extend our iterations to 2 weeks instead of 1 week, right? So I can't even tell you that after this iteration, we're going to have another iteration of the same length. There's probably a good certitude that's going to happen, but I don't really know. The only time frame that I actually know is that this is going to be the end date of this particular iteration. Now, in terms of the actual features and things that we are growing on this, the different branches of this application, we're pretty confident that by the end of this iteration, we will have all of the past features that we've already delivered on, plus these few little things that we're currently working on right now. Okay? And that's what we know we will have delivered by the end of this iteration. What we're going to have delivered by the end of 3 iterations from now, I can't possibly tell you that. I mean, even if I can give you a kind of a cone of certainty, like it could be somewhere here or over here, but I can't really tell you exactly what that is. So what you have to do is you have to prune, right? They call this the refinement or the grooming process. I kind of like the term refinement. It makes a little bit more sense to me, in that you're looking through the backlog and you are identifying the most important features, or not even features, but the most important workflows of features that you need to have accomplished. And you prioritize those stories of those workflows above all the others, so that those most important things get done first. And then when you have a cutoff date, you know that you've accomplished at least the most valuable things up to that point. Okay? Then that's it. Like if you have a due date of a certain point, you may not have all the features that you wanted delivered into it, but at least you've delivered something. And you've delivered the most important things, the most valuable things to the user. So I would tell this person, this is by Christian0715, I would tell you that essentially what this means is you can make sure that you can deliver, first of all. Make sure that you can actually deploy what has been built, or find what the point is where the features have been worked that can be delivered. And honestly, if you're who was it that was telling you this? And he's telling me we can't deliver on dates. I don't know who he is. So we have a new manager who's done Agile. Okay, so whoever this manager is not really, if they are trying to deliver a product and they tell you, look, the features aren't ready to go. We don't have anything that's deployable. If that's the case, I'm sorry to tell you that your Agile developer or your Agile management manager is not as good as they think they are. Okay, you need to have deployable, reliable, dependable software that can be deployed early and quickly and often. Okay, this is the idea behind nightly builds, being able to have an application that is deployable and ready to go now, today. And that means that the processes that your team utilizes in order to do that delivery process need to be a part of their daily work. Okay, the habit that I see a lot of teams fall into is to have a deployment where they work on something and then on Friday, they bring everything together and then try to deploy it. And then they scramble for the rest of the day and possibly the weekend on trying to fix all the bugs that were discovered over the weekend after they deployed it. That is a terrible way to go. You should not be doing that. That is not agile. So if that is what your if that is what your agile manager says to you, that we cannot deploy because we have all these other things going, that means they are not as good of an agile person as they think they are. I'm sorry to tell you, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate and spam and vitriol that Steve is saying this, that you're not that good of an agile person. I'm sorry, but this person does not understand fundamentally what it means to be agile. You need to have delivery. You need to be able to deliver software regularly. Okay, so now that doesn't mean that features don't, delivering or building features does not cross over multiple iterations. That absolutely can happen. Sometimes features take a long time to build and they don't go into a deployment, but that's it. They should be a separate piece of the code base that is typically a branch on your GitHub that particular feature is being worked on, but it doesn't get merged into the trunk of the repo. And so it doesn't get deployed. It only gets deployed when it's ready. So you need to find out, okay, what is ready? That's the thing that you need to actually find out. Ask your agile manager, if you had to deploy by the end of day today, what can you deploy? And then deploy it. That's what you need to be able to do. And don't wait till Friday. Don't wait till the end of the iteration. Deploy it now. Tell me what you can deploy now. And that needs to be the case for every single day. Maybe it's the exact same thing. Maybe every single day, look, we haven't done anything to trunk. We've got all these people working on the features. Okay, but can it be deployed again? Can the same thing that you currently have be deployed again? Because that's actually important. If a team is making changes, but they're not doing it in the feature branch, and they're sometimes merging these things into the master branch, and you may think that no work has actually been done that's going to be pushed, but it turns out that it actually has. So there's actually some relevance in making sure that your team is deploying every single day. And in fact, we're supposed to have you should be doing daily builds. You really should. It just means that your team is actually agile. It should be the goal. If you're taking 2 days to do it, it's not too bad. 2 to 3 days, okay. If you're taking a full iteration to do a deployment, I'm sorry, but that's not the right process. That's not how it's supposed to be done. I get it. This is how we typically think about things. This is how we typically organize and strategize our timeframes, is that we have XYZ set of features that are from our backlog. We're moving them into the process and into this particular sprint. And these things are supposed to be deployed and delivered on, Friday, the last day of the iteration, or maybe the day before, and we're going to demo the day after and, pick out bugs and stuff on Friday. That is a very common strategy that I'm telling you right now, I believe is wrong, because it means that your team is always wondering on that final day if it's actually going to work. And that is never a good scenario for your team, because it means they have to scramble if something goes wrong. And they may find out, they may have to roll back the entire week's worth of progress to fix whatever that thing was that was broken. And now you've wasted an entire week. And even worse, are teams that do 2 week or 3 week or 4 week sprints, where they've been working on this for 4 weeks, for a whole month. They go to deployment, stuff is broken everywhere, and they have to roll back, and they don't even know how far back they have to roll back. If you are doing daily builds, and in fact hourly builds if you can get there, right? That's really weird. Like when you're doing test-driven, that's kind of the idea behind test-driven development, is if you can run all your tests, your build is ready, and you can deploy it. Like hey, my tests tell me this is ready to be deployed. So literally every 30 seconds, if you're doing TDD and you're 30 seconds to a minute for each, red, green refactor cycle, that means your product is ready to be deployed every 30 seconds to a minute. That's what your team should be aspiring to be able to do. If you can get it to a nightly build or a daily build, whatever you want to call it, That's what you should be trying to, try to work your way off of being this weekly or iteration-based deployment process and be ready to deploy every single time. Now, when I say deploy, when I say that you're going to deploy the product and it's ready to be deployed, that does not mean all of the features planned for the iteration are done. That is not what this means. Deployment should not be the final process. It is the final process of, deployment should not be the final process or the goal of the end of the iteration. It should be just a part of what the daily habits are of the developers, of the development team. It should be always ready to go. So if your team cannot say it is ready to go, it is ready to deploy, then you have a serious problem in your workflow. In the workflow of the team, there is a problem. You need to fix it. You need to identify, why is it that the team cannot deploy right now? Is it because we've improperly distributed our software on Git and GitHub or whatever our version control system is, right? Our version management system, whatever that is, the code management, source code management system is that you are using, probably Git. If you are not using it effectively, that may be the culprit as to why you cannot do these builds. Is it because the team isn't using testing frequently enough? Like, one of the things that we need is, before we go and deploy this stuff, we need to have tests around it to validate it and pass all of our CI pipeline. Okay, so that just simply means your teams need to write tests more frequently, or as part of the process better. Instead of doing their work and then handing it over to somebody else to write the tests for them, maybe those two people should be working together to build the test and do the implementation. Okay, that's the type of thing that you need to be doing, is you need to be evaluating what are the constraints. What is stopping your team from actually doing the delivery? Again, that doesn't mean delivering every single feature. It doesn't mean every feature that has been placed on the backlog is now being delivered in this iteration. That is not what that means. Okay? Delivery simply means we have something that can be deployed right now. We pressed a test button that I know if I take this last commit that I just made to my Git repository and I push it up to the branch on GitHub, and then we merge that branch into, well, you don't even have to merge it, right? You merge it when the feature is done. But if I push commit on this, all my tests pass. We run it through CI/CD pipeline. It can be deployed and delivered. And I know that every 30 seconds to a minute. That's what you should be at. That's where you want your team to be, because that means that they are dynamic and they can deliver product at a moment's notice. It is continuously ready to go out the door. Okay? That's where your team should be. So I've labored that point probably too much, but it's one of those things that I think really needs to be hammered home. Okay? So that would be my first step in that. And then since you have a deployment time, a deployment date, that's it. We're deploying on that time. You told me that you're the agile guy. You're telling me that you can now deliver software at a moment's notice because these builds are constantly being built every 30 seconds to a minute to an hour to daily, whatever it is. You should know by the end of the day, this thing can build. So that means on this date, you should be able to deliver whatever it is. Again, it may not have all of the features that we've slated for this, but it's got everything that is actually deployable done. Then that's what it should be. And again, if you're agile management person, your product owner or whoever is telling you, we don't have anything to deploy, then that person needs to have a retrospective on their own workflow and how they view their job. Because I'm sorry to say, and I know this is very rough, I'm pretty adamant about this, but if your team cannot deploy regularly, your team is not agile. It's not. We're supposed to be able to deliver working software. That's what we need to be able to do. And if you are not able to deliver working software, at regular intervals, and I'm not talking months, I'm talking days, then your team is not working in the most efficient agile way. That's what you have to get your team to be able to do. So that's going to be it for that question, I think. And I'm probably going to wrap it up here because it has been over an hour. I'll probably do some more of these things. I like doing this. Like, I like to answer these questions because I'm pretty strong about my opinions. I know you guys know that, but I've worked with teams now. I've worked with other teams doing kind of agile, lightish, scrumish stuff, and Scrum is an interesting process that I don't really want to dig too far into. But I've worked with teams doing Scrum. I've worked with teams doing agile. They say they're agile. And then I've also been doing a lot of work lately with like really actually implementing it and actually doing the work and actually putting it in place. And having teams that are willing to adopt and accept these changes in their workflow. And it's changed everything. It's changed not just the way that they work, but also the way that the management sees the work that they do. And that is, I think, the actual goal. Is that management, the transparency that is offered by doing, the user story thing that I was talking about before, that type of transparency of the work that the team is doing is actually understood by management without having to delve into the technical details is life-changing for a business. It's absolutely life-changing because the developers no longer fear or distrust the management, and the management no longer fears or distrusts the development team. And also this being able to deliver software at regular intervals means that the value that is being provided by the team is continuously seen, right? That's what this is all about, is continuously delivering value to the customer that is observable and understood. That is what Agile is being able to do, is using the system that I'm talking about here. It is these practices, because that's what I'm talking about here, are practices, right? Having nightly builds, that's a practice. Using TDD is a practice. Pair programming with other people that have special skills, that's a practice, right? The scenario I was talking about earlier where if you have a developer that's not really doing, they're working on something, but they're not writing the tests, well, get somebody who does write the tests to work side by side with them. That's a pair programming scenario. And there's no reason you can't do that. Okay. And it needs to be done. Those are the type of things that have to be done. Those are practices that we do in order to maintain our agility. So we have to, your job as a manager, if you are in the management business and you're a product owner, you're a scrum master, you're a project manager, whatever the role is that you've been given, but you're kind of in charge of making sure that this team is fulfilling their obligations. Whatever that role is, what you have to do is identify what those impediments are and suggest practices for them to implement in order to become more efficient, right? That's what you have to do. And then you have to give them time to absorb those practices. Because trust me, it's a long process to get comfortable with. If I told a team, okay, we're just going to do TDD now, what do you think is going to happen to the velocity of that team? If all of a sudden, okay, we're on TDD now, what's that going to do to the team velocity? Well, if they don't have any experience doing TDD, it's going to slow it way down. So you have to give them the breathing room to adopt that new practice, and then it will become more efficient, right? You have to understand that just because you remove the constraint doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get immediately a better flow, okay? It's going to improve the flow, but sometimes these things take time in order to improve. So, that's basically what you got to do if you're going to be in charge of the management. If you are in the software development team, you need to fight for these things. You need to say these are the practices we want to do because we know that it's going to ensure our jobs. We know that it's going to visualize or better explain and communicate to management what it is the work is that we're doing and why we need to do it. And also those continuous delivery things really means that the business starts to see the value that the team delivers. And when that happens, the trust is built, right? The business owners trust the teams to deliver on good quality software that provides value. That's the ultimate goal of Agile, right? All right, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I am surprised I didn't get any viewers on this. I think maybe something happened when I started this stream, but all of you that get to watch this afterwards, it gets to be recorded, and I'll chop it up and edit out the little, intro part where I just talk about things or let the music run while everybody hops on. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button. Let me know you liked it, and drop me a comment and tell me what you liked about it. And if you'd like to see more of these type of things, don't forget to subscribe if you're not already.